And we are delighted to be joined this evening by award-winning best-selling author, poet, and literature professor Mary Karr. Her first memoir, The Liars Club, which won prizes for Best First Nonfiction and was a New York Times bestseller for more than a year, was recently named number 4 on Entertainment Weekly's list of the top 100 books of the last 25 years. Her second memoir, Cherry, was also a New York Times bestseller, and her third memoir, entitled Lit, chronicles her journey into the Catholic Church from an admittedly sordid past. Please give a warm Busted Halo welcome to Mary Karr. What I think is a beautiful image of your son, 7 at the time, Dev.
Yes.
Dev, your son was the one who wanted to go to church.
He asked me to go to church, and no one else on the planet could have asked me to go to church. He came up and said, I want to go to church today. It was a Sunday. I was reading the New York Times. I was eating a bagel. And I said, why? With that tone of voice. And he said, to see if God's there. And I said, oh. Well, I didn't like soccer either, and I went. So we embarked on this thing I called God-a-rama, where I was looking for a church for him. I had no intention of joining a church, but he wanted to go to church. And we went, I called the only person I knew who happened to be an Episcopalian, who had any kind of regular religious. Turns out I knew a lot of people who went to all kinds of churches and temples and zendos, and they didn't talk to me about it because I was such a, stubborn little agnostic. But, and we walked out, we got in the car, and I said, was God there? He's like, well, yeah. Like, where were you? And so I thought, I have to find a place for this kid.
You describe in the book that when you went around to these churches, it was as if a mom was taking their kid to soccer.
Oh, no.
And you sat there with like a paper bag and read.
I would grade papers. He would go to the Sunday school or something. I wanted to know what they were talking about. I would sit in the back of the church or temple or zendo. We went to a Jewish midrash. And I would grade papers or read with a cup of coffee. I brought a Starbucks and sat in the back and most of the time didn't pay much attention. To tell you how unlikely I thought Catholicism was for me, one of my best friends is a very well-known writer named Tobias Wolff. He went to a Catholic church. I never went until like a year and a half into this.
And that was one of the first encounters.
It was the strangest thing. People would stand up and say, I'd like to offer a prayer of thanks for my daughter who's just back from Afghanistan, or I'd like to offer prayer for my mother who just passed, or my son has a cancer surgery. And just to hear people who maybe knew each other, maybe didn't, stand up and say out loud their deepest loves and their deepest fears, I just started to cry. I thought it was incredibly beautiful, not the ritual of the Mass, which so many artists fall for, all the gold stuff at the front. It was the people, really, that I was moved by.
And ultimately, that drew you in.
They drew me in. There was a priest there who was a little Irish parish priest who recently died, who's became one of my best friends, Father Joseph Kane. I've written about him. And he was a theological ninja. I mean, he was not a rabble-rouser, and yet, when the Gay and Lesbian Organization of Syracuse went timidly to him for a meeting about using their church, they start making their pitch. And he sort of interrupts them and says, well, when do we start, right? You just want to use the church, right? Well, sure, of course. So he was an example of someone who has such spiritual development that he's incapable of saying untrue things, and it made him very profound. So I would say something to him like, I think women should be priests. And he would say, I'm sure the Holy Father prays about that a lot. And I would say, I don't think the Pope is the ultimate religious authority. And he's like, well, maybe you will someday. I mean, you would go at him and he would just duck, and you would be on the other side of him wondering what happened.
And this was someone that you credit with being a significant figure in your own faith life.
A huge part of my faith. When he was dying, I saw him every day. He flunked out of hospice.
What does that mean?
Well, he's supposed to die. He didn't die. Everybody gathers around. You know, he's like, I'm not dead yet. You know, it's like, so they sent him back to the nursing home. And one day I got really mad. He was lying in his own excrement, and I couldn't get any. It was too big for me to change him. I couldn't get anybody there. I was so mad. He said, what are you so mad about? You're pacing to the hall and looking around and storming, or what's wrong with you? I said, I'm really mad at the aides because they don't come change you. He's like, they're going to be here. It's not a big deal. I said, it's a big deal to me. I don't like to see you suffer like this. And he says, God suffers more. That's what I mean about the theological ninja thing. Like, he just says these amazing things. I said, yeah, Father, but the cross was 3 hours. This is years you're doing this. And I said, why aren't you mad to be suffering like this? He's like, I think I've had too much fun. So a very, very powerful example for me of the humility, because the last thing I am, as you clearly can see, is humble, and or soft-spoken, or forgiving, or non-judgmental, or all the things that he was. And he was like an embodiment of that. I never went to confession that he wasn't like, oh, Mary, you know God loves you. What are you so upset about? You know, I mean, he was just an amazing, amazing man. And being with him when he died was very profound.
Yeah. Since you are something of a Catholic celebrity, do you find that people are looking to you, they want to know, what do you think about the church or the Pope?
Yeah, I'm like, you know, why don't you call me like when we feed a zillion orphans every damn day? You know, why don't you call me because we have an AIDS ministry in my church, or we feed 800 homeless people a week. Why don't you call me and congratulate me about what my church does? But of course they don't. They call me about the pedophiles.
But what you have said is that we seem to be talking about the wrong things.
Well, that's what I think. You know, all we talk about is sex. All we talk about is sex and doctrine. The degree to which sexuality, celibacy, not celibacy, marriage, not marriage, that dominates what the faith is, and the degree to which, as a practicing Catholic, that all those things are totally irrelevant to my experience of my faith. On the airplane on the way out, there was a guy sitting next to me who was sucking his thumb. A grown man, like 40 years old. He's sucking his thumb. And if he had been disemboweling kittens, I would have been less repelled by him. I wish this man dead for 4 hours. And then I got off the plane, and I was praying, and I was thinking, maybe that's what he needs to do. What is it my business if he sucks his thumb? What is it my business? And what keeps me from being the person that Jesus, I think, calls us all to be, whether we're Catholic or not, is wanting to kill my fellow human beings. And that is a moment-to-moment daily struggle with my own ego, with my own sense of judgment and righteousness. That is what kills me spiritually. And to me, what I find in the church is help with that. And yet we don't talk about that. I don't know if y'all saw in the New York Times last week, we are the most tolerant religion. That 68%, 72% or something of Catholics, would support gay marriage or have gay friends they support and accept. And my experience of religious people, of the nuns I know, of priests, and my fellow Catholics is that, we're called to work with the poor, and we're just not that damn bad, We just aren't that bad. When I was baptized, Richard Ford, who's kind of a very famous fiction writer, Pulitzer Prize winning, National Book Award winner, sends me a postcard that says, Karr, not you on the Pope's team, say it ain't so, ! And when Lit came out, he wrote me a very moving fan letter where he said he was very suspicious of my writing in Lit about coming to believe, and he felt that I had explained a feeling to him, like how you could believe these things, what comfort and solace this could give a person. Catholicism is not doctrine, it's not Rome, it's what happens when you pray and it's like anything else. You can't judge any church based on its doctrine because they're all nuts and they're all beautiful. Someone accused me on my website of, Catholicism is a crutch for you. I said, yeah, if you only had one leg, you'd have a crutch too.